And this is the journey towards Allhallows. This is a sport first, and then you get to Allhallows, and then you are, as you said, one of the the newer teachers that arrived in the mid-90s, and up until that point, it'd been
Yes.
quite a. I think we'd all certainly agree, an older generation of teachers for sure. No doubt about that. When I arrived in
Yes.
'93, you know, but
Yeah.
there was.
Go on. Sorry.
No, I was going to say. So it was you. It was Kerry Stevenson. It was Greg Longley, and it was.
And Dr. Adrian Rowley, the
That's
chemistry teacher.
right. That's right. Yes. Now,
Yes.
of course,
Yeah. And
you were all fresh. Mm.
we were all fresh faced. Dr. Rowley tried to think he was fresh faced, but he was actually quite old. But again, it's really interesting. We've all remained friends to this day. And I don't know whether you know this, but Greg actually he actually moved to Australia as well. He lives in Sydney.
That's rich. You know,
I don't know
basically
whether
back.
anybody knows that.
I had an inkling he might have done, from seeing some of the photographs and things and people who were connected with him. But interestingly, in 1998, so the school falls over in 98 at December, which we're going to talk a bit about in a mo. But then in 1999, I'm in
Yep.
the French battlefields on the Somme doing a tour with a friend of mine, and I'm in a trench, one of the sort of ones they've either made up or it's still just about there. And I look up, and lo and behold, right above me, hello, Dave, is Mr. Longley doing a school tour. And I was like, that was just the most bizarre thing. So obviously he'd got another job
And
and another school.
yeah, and of course, I think he was teaching in a school just outside London, and I think that's where he met his future wife, who
Right,
was working over there. She's from Sydney. She was working for, I think, for a telco company,
right.
and
Wow.
then yeah, and then that's where his journey to Australia began. The
Amazing.
interesting thing about that is that he knew your face, and it's really interesting because I will share with you a very interesting story about Keith Moore and a very special day. It's a very special day in Queensland today. It's the Royal Exhibition Day, which is a public holiday. But I'll share that. Just remind me, I'll share
Yeah.
a very
Yeah.
strange story
Yeah.
about Keith Moore with you later.
Fantastic.
Um,
Excellent.
but did you want to know anything more about that initial time when I
Yeah.
first started it?
Absolutely. When you first
Oh,
started, first memories of starting out, what was your sort of, you've talked a bit about the drive and the ruse de mist, I'm sure, and all those other things, the birds upstairs, all those weird and wonderful things that we kind of had experience of, but other
yeah, I
memories.
mean, I mean, for me, it was fairly obvious that that the headmaster and I'm thinking who the deputy was. It may have been Mr.
Derek Blumen.
Crease. And
Oh, Mr. Crease. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, and obviously gone down the path of, and I think they were very honest. They wanted some younger members of staff. It was obviously that the staff, but of course, I mean, we're of a generation. You have the utmost respect, but I do think we brought a different energy to the school and different demands of the students. And I remember my first being showed around the school. Obviously the memories of the Great Hall. I mean, I've got so many wonderful memories. I was only recalling to a member of staff that I'm working with at the moment. I'm working in a sort of a TAFE college at the moment, and I said, "Oh, the school I worked at." I said, "I'm doing this interview." I said, "But one of my memories of the Great Hall was the headmasters. We used to have this bread kicking competition up onto the senior balcony," and they said, "It sounds like Hogwarts." And I showed them a picture, and I said, "Actually." I said, I remember showing my children a picture of All Hallows, and I said, it really was as magical as Hogwarts. I mean, of course, for many, many people like yourself attached OHs, it was a sad end to the school, and maybe we can talk about that later. But for me, it was a magical place. I enjoyed my time there immensely. My teaching, as I said, I had some challenging students. And in all fairness, David, I probably, when I came to Brisbane, spent 20 years at Brisbane Grammar School. I don't know whether you've done, you can look it up on Google. It's probably one of the premier private schools in Brisbane. The private school system here is very different. The schools are very large, 1,500 boys,
Wow.
international standard sporting facilities. But again, that's probably there's a lot more private schools in Australia simply because they receive government funding,
Right.
as do
Yeah.
the Catholic schools. So of course they sort of in a sense, they've got a place in the market. They don't really have to sell themselves, but of course, academically. So I probably had access to better academics, ironically, in Australia. However, but I think in terms of a challenge, I think it was always one of the great things about teaching is getting the best out of your students and trying to inspire them to do their best. It's one of the things I think that as a teacher, you only sort of realize at the end of your career, it's not really about the teacher, it's about the student. And as long as the students get their best. And I don't think, did I ever teach you? I don't think I ever did I?
You did. You did. You taught me. You must have taught me history
Was it
because it was
history
either
in
history. Because I would have
what
been
year?
fifth when you started. I would have been in the fifth
Yeah,
form,
yes.
fifth year, and
Yeah,
then
so
lower
so so
sixth, and then
GCS.
yeah,
Yeah, so the GCSE, yeah, I do remember that, yeah, and of course
yeah.
for me history was really my subject of passion.
Because in my
English I
year group,
sort
it
of
was
paid
it was
lip service.
people like Phil Yolland, and people like
Phil, who,
trying.
yeah, I'm friends with Phil on Facebook. I see that he's still got his good looks, and he's certainly got two beautiful children. So I do follow a lot of people, most people. It's really interesting because I don't accept any since I've been teaching Australia. I don't accept sort of Facebook, but anybody from Allhallows I do. And I think that says a lot about the connection I have still with the school.
It says something about the place, and one of the things we've mentioned obviously sport, because that was a big thing, and you know the connections that we all made through different sports, and Seb will tell you, as many others will, I wasn't massively team sporty, I was more about the racket sports, but you of course cricket, I did do some cricket at All Hallows. Tell me some
Yes.
memories of the sport.
Well, I mean, I'll start with obviously, I mean, just the way the year was structured. And of course, I was given a baptism very quickly because I was told I had to coach Rugby Union. And of course, I think I was given the junior team then. And I remember going, I've never coached Rugby Union. But Greg was great. Obviously, his background playing at a high level in Cirencester, and I think we had some coaching lessons. And again, I picked up the sport very quickly because, of course, we had to referee. I do remember, getting quite excited for sport in the afternoons. Going home, getting changed, and then running up to the paddock, having a rugby training session, and again, even with the rugby, we were a small school, but I always felt we always punched above our weight or tried to, and I think maybe Greg certainly and myself we brought a sense that we did have a competitive edge. It wasn't
Yeah,
about just all Hallows turning up. We were the small school playing the
yeah,
bigger schools. That was it. But we wanted for everybody to wear the school jersey with pride, and also make those connections. I mean, sport's not about winning, of course. We all know that now. But it is nice to win.
yeah,
But it's more importantly to be competitive. And at the end of the day, I loved all of the camaraderie that I saw amongst the players because sport is a very good. I mean, obviously, with your racket sports, again, great facilities to play all of those sorts of things. And but my memories of rugby were, panicking over the fact I didn't know all the rules to start with. And Greg said, "Do you know you're refereeing today?" And I'm like, "Right, okay." And I think two students on the sidelines just said, "Sir, you call the ball when it's out, and we'll help you which arm to put up." Where I was on a steep learning curve, but it's really interesting. I really have a passion for rugby union now. Living in a country where the obsession's rugby league, unfortunately,
of
they're the
course.
megastars, and the plight of the Wallabies is probably for a different conversation. But also, again, I think with the rugby, just that sense of community on a Saturday. We used to finish the games, and then all the juniors, it was about getting changed, and then going supporting the first 15. And I've thoroughly enjoyed that. The staff, the sense of certainly on the home games. And then afterwards, I love that tradition of the social aspect afterwards, where both teams, both captains, you'd go and have your sausage and chips in the
Yeah,
in the dining room, and
yeah,
everybody would have a sense of community. It's very different in Australia, David. The sport is very competitive. there's no socializing.
Right.
It's all about playing the game over here. So even though I spent 20 years in a very big private school, it would be very formal. You'd play the
It's very
game, you go
different.
home.
Wow. Wow.
Very, very
Yeah.
different. And of course, and then in my first year, Greg very kindly offered me to go to I think it was maybe first or second year, the Roslyn Park Sevens, which again, people like Seb Warner and Tommy and Richard Pusey. Pusey was an interesting character. I'm sure he's still knocking around on his farm. Is he farming?
He
Um,
must be. I mean, he'd be great to do an interview with. I'm hoping to get him to come to the clay pigeon shooting soon. So maybe we'll get him on.
yeah, I don't know whether I trust him with a gun. I used to panic when I used to see a CCF on Wednesday afternoons.
That's exactly what I
But
said
yeah,
with
but then
Seb.
we had yeah, but we had a great we had great memories of the Roslyn Park Sevens. I mean, literally, I went down really as water boy and strapper. I think Greg, I left all the technical stuff to Greg, the rugby expert. But again, all of those things, great memories, great experiences, and what was really nice is that the school actively encouraged participation in these bigger events. You know, we weren't ever going to win,
Yeah.
but it's more about the experience.
It's
But for
interesting you say
me,
because it was very much about that. Sport was about, taking part, but winning. We did hit above our weight. I really felt like we had, particularly with rugby and those, we put together a good team. I wasn't part of it, but I could
yes,
see.
and yeah, it's absolutely. I think when you're working in a small school like Allhallows, you've got limited numbers. You've got to make the most of the talent around you. Now, of course, that could be physical or but for us more mental. It was more about telling the boys, trying to instill in them that what you are good players. And certainly I think I brought that more to the cricket side, which was obviously a sport that I had a lot more input in, obviously running the first 11. And my memories of the first 11 cricket is the fact that I did sort of, I think I may have brought a little bit of northern grit playing. I played a lot of cricket in the north of England. I played first 11 at university. I also represented the Welsh universities at cricket. So I knew what I was doing, and I think most players knew that. But it was more about, I think, on-field organisation, and keeping that. Cricket's a game where pit players can drift off. I did realise that obviously playing in the southwest as well, there was a lot of good natural cricketers there as well. That obviously still are playing today. People like Will Murray, John Wicks. In fact, John texted me 2 days ago because my youngest son is on the cusp of becoming a full-time cricketer. He's very
Fantastic.
talented. And so, but it's really interesting about the cricket is that obviously the early part of the season I hated because obviously you had to umpire as well. And the early part of the season was, or even in the southwest of England, I used to love taking the jumpers off just to stay warm. But I mean, once you get into those glorious summer days, there's nothing better. And look, what a great facility we had at the school. I
It's
mean,
perfect.
I still have memories of the clubhouse and the scoreboard in the top corner where the nets were. But more importantly, I remember just that, even the fact that we had the peacocks, and,
Peacocks.
and, and
Yes.
yes, and the sound of the peacocks have always, I keep saying to my wife, if we get a property, I'm having a peacock because she said, oh, you can't have a peacock. But anyway,
I,
I still
I can
remember
hear that
that,
sound
and
now. Yeah,
yes,
totally.
and it's really interesting. It sounds cliches, but sounds and smells and thoughts do take you back. Certainly take me back to All
Yeah.
Hallows. And for me, the cricket was something I had a real passion for. I remember I organised new jumpers for the team, and more importantly, I convinced Keith Moore to allow me to take a tour to the north of England. That still think people like John Richardson and I mean, look, the names. Some of the names are a little foggy. I mean, obviously Seb
Mm,
Warner, Will
yeah.
Murray, John Wicks,
Yeah.
John
Yeah.
Richardson.
Yeah.
Who
Tammy was
was
there, wasn't he?
George?
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
Tammy was there.
Yeah.
Um, Tom Morgan, of course.
Tom
There's
Morgan.
another,
Yep.
and
Because I saw the
yeah, and of
photograph was
course,
put
I
on
mean,
online recently. That photograph of the tour.
yes,
Yeah.
yeah, and again, that was. I mean, I convinced the headmaster. I'm sure he thought we were just going for a bit of a drinking tour. I mean, it's interesting because I think my teaching career traversed two lives really. You couldn't do that sort of stuff there, but we were sort of right on the edge where you could still, have a few beers with your
Yeah.
students. Um, and I remember convincing Keith Moore. I said, "Look, this is about the students' experience in cricket in the north of England." Which they did. I mean, the weather was, as you expect in England. I think we had one game that was rain affected, but again, we went there and performed very very well. And I think it's really interesting when the school closed. Keith Moore, I had to obviously. I asked for an open reference, obviously to try and get my next teaching
Yeah.
position. And he made a really interesting comment. He said, Nigel has brought obviously a level of professionalism to sport, in everything that he did. But on the cricket field, perhaps too much.
That's a great reference.
And I say that, and it was a good reference. But I remember thinking he never forgave me for running him out because, of course, I also took over running the staff team, which I thoroughly enjoyed. And I still remember running him out in the opening game, thinking, I don't think I've done my teaching career much good here. I flicked it off the legs, took a quick single down to fine leg, caught him through, and he was like half asleep, and he got run out. I'm thinking, well, I did allow him to open the bowling though, so I think.
Oh, well,
he
that's
forgave
all
me.
right.
But I mean,
That's fine.
memories like that, and then afterwards the social aspects, and even with the cricket. Always went out and, we went back to the hall and as a staff member going into the staff room and having a drink with the opposite number was really, really nice. And of course, some of the other teams that we played, the likes of, Blundell's and Exeter
Yeah.
and all those Camford and places
Yeah.
like that. Fabulous experiences.
Just
But I do
wonderful.
think as a school, I think we really did perform. And I don't know whether you know this, but in my very last summer, the summer before, I played cricket for Upline obviously as a player for them. But
Yeah.
I actually entered our school in the local equivalent of the T20 comp because I thought we were
Wow.
good enough.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know
And you,
whether anybody remembers that, but we actually did really well. We played a
I
lot
didn't
of
know
men's
that.
teams.
Wow.
Yeah, we actually, ironically, we ended up playing Uplyme in the semi-finals, and it
Right.
went very close. I actually pulled my older brother in to play, who'd actually played for Gloucester Seconds. I thought we might
Fantastic.
have a chance because Uplyme,
Yeah.
again, cricket's
Pretty
very
good.
strong in
Yeah.
that part of the world,
Yeah.
and I tell you, we almost beat them. I think it went
Oh,
down to the last over for them to hit the
wow.
winning runs. I think I blame Seb Warner for that. He bowled too many beamers.
Yeah, no, I would understand that. The thing is, that, again, that shows the closeness of the community at Allhallows.